welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the books I read in the month of March. I have in total 7 books here, so I'll try to do it quickly, otherwise I'll be sitting here forever and we don't want that. So let's jump into the books. The first book I want to talk about is Miss Pettigrew Lives for a Day by Winifred Watson. I picked this up because I wanted a funny, light-hearted read. Considering everything going on, I really felt like I needed a break, so I think this was the perfect book to pick up. I really enjoyed it. In this one, we follow one day in the life of Miss Pettigrew, who is this middle-aged governess down on her luck. She really cannot find employment, and she also feels like she's gonna be turned out in the street because she cannot pay her rent. So she goes to the job agency to find employment, and they send her by mistake to work for this nightclub singer. And Miss Pettigrew finds herself in a difficult situation because she ends up meeting these people, she ends up doing all these things which are so out of her comfort zone. She comes from this very rigid background with really proper English gentlewoman upbringing, and she meets these people who live a complete opposite life. It's kind of the meeting of opposites here, and Miss Pettigrew is facing these situations which are kind of funny, and she tries to figure out what to do and how to do, and it just changes her completely. Her life literally turns upside down in the span of 24 hours. So this, in a way, hasn't aged all that well. They are just, you can really tell that it was written in 1938. There's just definitely some racist remarks and anti-Semitic remarks in this, which would not go down well in a book published today. But you take it as it is. It is a classic in its sense, and I can see why it was popular at the time and why it is so popular now. This was made into a movie, and it was also read out on BBC. So yeah, if you're looking for something funny and lighthearted, then I would definitely recommend this. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I picked up was The Temple House Vanishing by Rachel Donahue. So this is a mystery, and you need to try to discover what happened 25 years ago when a teacher and a student disappeared from this private Catholic boarding school. So we follow 2 different timelines. One is in the present, where a journalist writes about what happened and tries to uncover the truth, and then the past, in which we follow the perspective of the girl who disappeared. So the girl who disappeared, her name is Louise, and she goes to this boarding school with a scholarship. She is really an outsider because everyone at this school comes from really rich backgrounds, and she feels out of place, and she really wants to belong and be recognized for who she is. And she forms this friendship, really close friendship with Victoria, another girl, and together they become involved in a way with this art professor at the school. And then some months later, this art professor and Louise disappear. So I really like the setting, I really like the vibes of the school. It's very gothic. But at the same time, I didn't feel too connected to these characters to be interested in what happened or figuring out what happened. So I feel that in a way, there wasn't enough momentum built throughout the book. I really did not see the end coming, and I guess that was pretty well done. So what I really found interesting is how this school is perceived to be this elite boarding school, but is actually only elite in appearance, and that contrasted really a lot with how things were and how you discover actually how things are as you go on. But what I felt it was lacking as well is like some more depth into the school and some other characters in the school as well, maybe some teachers or maybe some of the other girls, because we mainly hear from Louise and Victoria, her best friend. So overall, I think this was pretty a solid debut. I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but it is not going to be among my favorite mysteries. The next book was actually one I listened to, and it is Hunger by Roxane Gay. I've been meaning to pick this up ever since I read Bad Feminist a couple of years ago. This is such a hard book to read, and it's also a hard book to talk about because it's such a personal memoir. It's so raw and honest and really heartbreaking. Roxane Gay talks about how she was gang raped at the age of 12 by her boyfriend and his friends, and how she tried to cope with it, basically by turning to food and trying to form this protective shield around her body against harm. She talks about her experience of living in a large body, a body which society categorizes as super morbidly obese. And she talks about practicalities of living in this large body, and how going to restaurants is difficult for her because she never knows whether she would fit into a chair, for example. And these are things no one really talks about when talking about being overweight. You always hear talking about stuff like, well, people made the wrong choice considering their food, but you don't really talk about how being overweight sometimes is because some psychological problems, in her case being PTSD. I gave it 4 stars, not 5, and that is because overall I felt that the chapters were too short and choppy, and I didn't really see where the structure was in this book. I think it went all over the place at some points, and the author herself writes that she pulled this book together from different Tumblr posts and blog posts, and it really reads as such. It reads as stream of consciousness style posts, blogs, I guess. And I just don't know, I just felt that it needed a bit more structure. But other than that, this was really a 4-star read for me, and I highly recommend it. The next book I picked up was The Warden by Anthony Trollope. So I've been meaning to read an Anthony Trollope novel for quite a while, and I'm not sure that this was the right one to start with. This one was meant to be a really short one, and I think because of its length, the plot is overly simplistic as well, even though it has a lot of great characters and a lot of great relationships in this one. So this one is basically about 19th century church politics, and it is about the abuse of charity funds by the clergy. So it is really about Victorian life and different people in this era. There is a reformer who challenges the warden's right to those funds, because most of those funds go to his own pocket and not in the pockets of the people he's actually in charge of, because the warden is in charge of this almshouse. So there are these interesting views, this modern view of what is right, and these views which go against the really established institution of the church, and also how the church defends its own rights, I guess. I love the relationships in this novel, in particular the relationship of the warden and his daughter, but also the relationship of the warden and his son-in-law. I think it verges on comical at some point, and even though this was not a favorite of mine, I would be interested to see how the series continues. I think the rest of the series is I think they're chunkier books, so I assume they're going to be much better than this one, even though it's my personal opinion that this was not the best. I think a lot of people enjoy it, as far as I could tell by reading some reviews on Goodreads. So 3 stars from me. The next book was also one I listened to, and it was the last book in the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden, The Winter of the Witch. The first book in this trilogy is The Bear and the Nightingale, and this one is such a popular series, and I can really see why. I was apprehensive when first starting out because it's so overhyped, but this one is definitely one that is worth the hype, and it has become, I think, one of my favorite fantasy series of all times. So this one is Russian folklore inspired, so that makes this fantasy world so unique, because I normally read like epic fantasy, but this one is just so atmospheric as well, beautifully written, and the setting is like 14th century Russia. And we mainly follow a girl who is a witch. She can see household spirits which no one else can see anymore because they don't believe anymore. Everyone has become religious and the world has become Christian, but what happens to these household spirits who are real? So this is a world of, I think, on the verge of change, when they have to find out what is best for them, the old ways or the new ways. And I think it is a beautiful story, which at the end is all about unity and finding the balance between the two. It is also a story with great character growth. So overall, if you want to read like a different type of fantasy, I think this one would be for you. Also, if you like a really fast-paced, plot-driven novel, this is a great one. So overall, this series was really highly enjoyable, and I think I loved all 3 of these books equally. So overall, for me, a 4-star read, and I highly recommend it. The next book I picked up was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I'm not gonna tell you for how many weeks I waited for this at the library, but it is insane. I knew I'm gonna love this, and I did. Last year I read Conversations with Friends, and it was one of my favorite books of last year, and I think this one will make the list this year. In this one we follow a couple. We follow Marianne and Connell. They come from this really small town, and they meet in high school, where Marianne is really ostracized socially. She's very smart and comes from a really rich background, and she's also emotionally abused at home. Connell, on the other hand, is very popular in high school. He comes from a working class background, and his mother works for Marianne. They form a relationship which doesn't last because Connell is afraid that his friends are going to find out about Marianne and him. And then we see them in college, where kind of the power dynamics shift because Marianne suddenly becomes popular and accepted, and Connell is the one who feels a bit depressed because he doesn't feel that he fits in. They also form a relationship while in college, and this book is about basically their relationship and how they are in society and how they have to comply with society's expectations and how they deal with society's expectations of them and their relationship. It is also about social status, and it is about how, when you're young, being socially accepted and being in a circle of friends who are also socially accepted is important for you, and how you would give up everything for social acceptance. Okay, how many times can I say social acceptance here? But in this book, you really see how they learn to know each other, but also how they learn to depend on each other. And it is at times really unhealthy. It is really a complicated relationship, and these people are also very complicated and really unlikable at times. But you also deeply feel for them and you deeply connect to them. So I really love how the relationship is written in this one, and it is really a hard one to read about because it can be so painfully true, you know. So overall, I would recommend Sally Rooney, I think, for everyone, and be prepared to read about characters and situations you really don't like though. So overall, I recommend it, and I think at this point, I will pick up whatever Sally Rooney writes because I think she is amazing. And the last book I want to talk about is Sword of Destiny by Andrzej Sapkowski, which is the second short story collection in the Witcher series. And you have to read the short story collections before you go into the series, otherwise the series won't make any sense. And I can really see why people say that, because there are a lot of characters are introduced here, and there's a lot of backstory to these characters, which I guess will be referred to when the series starts. I also have seen the first season of the adaptation on Netflix, and I can really tell that they took inspiration from the short story collection. So I can't wait to see where these stories will go. And at this point, I think this series is just so popular that it is a must read if you're into fantasy. I gave this short story collection 4 stars, and I think I gave the first one 3 stars. So yeah, can't wait to continue. So these are all the books I read in the month of March. I feel that this month was really a difficult one, and I think a lot of people say that it was one of the longest months ever. And I really feel like that too, because especially in the second part, considering everything that's going on, I really did not feel like reading. Despite that, I'm really happy that I read some really 4 or 5-star books. And I can't wait to see how April is gonna turn out. Let me know what was your favorite book of last month. I think for me that book was Normal People, and I'm really happy that I finally managed to read it, especially after so long a wait at the library. But I guess I'm stopping now because otherwise I will just be rambling on and on about nothing and everything. So this is where I leave you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.